The machines were the only witnesses to what was about to break. Emergency monitors blinked their silent rhythm across the ICU bay, while overhead fluorescents cast everything in that particular shade of hospital white that made even the living look halfway to gone. Genevieve Hartford stood on one side of the glass partition, her Valentino heels planted exactly shoulder-width apart, the stance she used in boardrooms when refusing to yield ground. Declan Cross stood on the other side, work boots still dusty from the mansion's marble floors, his calloused hands pressed flat against the barrier between him and the child dying on the gurney. 72 hours from now, one of them would have to choose. The doctor's voice cut through the antiseptic air with the practiced efficiency of someone who delivered impossible news twice a week. We need consent for emergency surgery, legal guardian signature, now. Genevieve's throat constricted around words that wouldn't form. Her mouth shaped the beginning of the only truth she knew: I'm her mother. But Declan's voice crashed over hers, raw and cracking. I've raised her for 4 years. The little girl on the bed tube, snaking from her tiny arms, made a gesture with fingers that barely moved. Both of them. The sign language was crude, improvised by a 4-year-old brain trying to hold together the only world she understood. The doctor's patience snapped like a bone. I need one signature. Choose. The moment froze there, suspended in the awful mathematics of love and law, and Genevieve's internal narrator took over the way it always did when reality became unbearable. 72 hours ago, she thought I didn't know this man existed. Now one of us has to decide if my daughter lives or dies. The freeze frame held for one more heartbeat before the world smeared into black. When the light returned, it carried a different quality entirely. Manhattan morning sun, not hospital fluorescence. The text on the screen read, 72 hours earlier. Genevieve woke at 5:43, 3 minutes before her alarm, the way she had every morning since the fire. Her penthouse bedroom offered an unobstructed view of the skyline, glass and steel catching the first hint of dawn, but she kept the blackout curtains drawn until the alarm gave permission for the day to begin. The phone on her nightstand delivered its reminder with the cold precision of automation. Anniversary. 4 years since Emma. She stared at the notification for exactly 10 seconds, then dismissed it with a swipe that felt like violence. The photo lived in the top drawer of her nightstand. She took it out now, careful not to crease the edges, though the corners had already softened from 4 years of this ritual. Emma, at 6 months old, eyes the color of deep water in sunlight, that impossible shade of green-blue that Genevieve's own eyes had never quite managed. The baby's wrist bore a heart-shaped birthmark, clearly visible against the white hospital blanket. Genevieve had placed a tiny silver bracelet on that wrist the day before the fire, engraved with initials, and a promise that felt like prophecy, now E.H. to Emma Love, always Mama. The memory arrived without invitation, the way it always did. Not the full horror of that night, just fragments. The smell of smoke. A nurse's face younger than she should have been for that kind of responsibility, reaching for the baby with urgent hands. I'll get her out, Ms. Hartford, I promise. The crack of something structural giving way. Darkness then, white ceiling tiles and an oxygen mask, and the nurse's voice different now, wrecked with apology. We couldn't find her. I'm sorry. We looked everywhere. Your daughter is gone. Genevieve had spent the first year convinced they were wrong. The second year hiring investigators who found nothing but ashes and bureaucratic dead ends. The third year threatening lawsuits against the hospital, the fire department, the city itself burning through her inheritance on lawyers who delivered sympathy but no answers. By the fourth year, the therapist had introduced words like closure and acceptance, clinical terms for surrender that Genevieve refused to internalize, even as she went through the motions of moving forward. The grieving process, they called it, as if grief were a destination you could reach and then leave behind. In the first 18 months after the fire, Genevieve had converted her pain into something productive. She took her family's pharmaceutical company, Hartford Industries, and rebuilt it with the single-minded focus of someone who needed a war to fight. She worked 18-hour days. She missed sleep and meals and the birthdays Emma would have celebrated. She grew the company's revenue by 40%, then 60%, then triple digits. Forbes stopped calling her an heiress and started calling her a visionary. By year 3, she had purchased the estate in Westchester. The mansion came with 3 acres of manicured distance from the world, and she had filled it with specialized equipment for children she didn't have yet preparing for a future she couldn't articulate. The therapist called it displacement. Genevieve called it insurance against complete collapse. By year 4, she had fostered 3 deaf baby girls and run through 14 caregivers, each one unable to tolerate what they described as the oppressive silence or the clinical atmosphere or Genevieve's impossible standards. She knew the real problem. She was trying to love these children as substitutes for Emma, and they could sense the failure in her every gesture. Her assistant's voice crackled through the phone at 8:15. "You have the board meeting at 9. Merger discussion with the Singapore office." Genevieve stood at her bathroom mirror applying the armor of makeup with practiced precision, each stroke a small act of creation. "Cancel everything." The assistant's pause carried weight. "Everything. It's the anniversary. I need to be alone." Another pause, this one gentler. "Of course, Ms. Hartford. Shall I send the car? No. I'll drive myself." The highway north offered the illusion of escape, though Genevieve knew she was driving toward the thing she could never leave behind. The Hartford estate rose from the Westchester landscape like an accusation, all glass and stone and old money made new. She had purchased it for the grounds, but somewhere in the renovation she had lost the thread between home and institution. The foyer echoed. The hallways stretched too long. The therapy wing, with its specialized equipment and color-coded schedules, felt like walking into a pharmaceutical advertisement. She found the current caregiver, number 14, sitting in the monitoring room with her head in her hands. The woman looked up when Genevieve entered, and her face carried the particular exhaustion of someone about to quit. "I can't do this anymore, Ms. Hartford. The silence is breaking me." Genevieve absorbed this with the same flat affect she used for quarterly reports. "You lasted 4 months. That's longer than most." The caregiver stood, already reaching for her purse. "It's not the work, it's the emptiness. Those beautiful little girls, and they just sit there like dolls. They need more than protocols. They need someone who knows how to love them." She was gone before Genevieve could formulate a response. The therapy room waited beyond the one-way mirror. Lily Rose and Iris sat in their designated spots, 4 years old and perfectly still, each with a tablet glowing in front of them. The speech therapist, Dr. Sarah Bennett, stood to Genevieve's left, making notes on a clipboard with the tired efficiency of someone documenting a losing battle. "They're regressing." Genevieve's jaw tightened. "That's why I hired you. To prevent regression." Dr. Bennett set the clipboard down with enough force to constitute rebellion. "I can't prevent what I didn't cause. These children need emotional engagement, not another round of auditory response testing." Genevieve kept her eyes on the girls. "Emotion is what got me into this. Structure is what will save them." Dr. Bennett's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Structure isn't salvation, Ms. Hartford. It's just another word for control." The phone in Genevieve's pocket vibrated. Unknown number. She ignored it until it vibrated again, then a third time. The text message appeared on her screen like a message from the dead. About Emma Hartford. "Meet at Central Park 3 p.m. Come alone. She's alive." Her hands started shaking before her brain caught up. The phone clattered against the monitoring console. Dr. Bennett turned concerned. Ms. Hartford. Genevieve couldn't answer. Her fingers moved independently, typing. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "The man who saved her." Declan Cross woke to the sound of small feet padding across hardwood, which meant his daughter was already up and testing the morning's boundaries. He found her in the kitchen, standing on a chair she'd dragged from the table, reaching for the cabinet where he kept the cereal. "Morning troublemaker." She turned, grinning with the particular mischief of a 4-year-old who knew she was breaking rules. Her hands moved in quick patterns. Declan translated automatically. "I'm not trouble. I'm helpful." He lifted her down from the chair, checking her arms for the redness that sometimes appeared when textures irritated her skin. The soft cotton of her pajamas seemed to be working today. "Good morning to you too, Emma. What kind of helpful were you planning?" Her fingers flew again. "Making breakfast for you. Because you're tired." Declan's chest tightened. 4 years old and already trying to parent him. I'm okay, baby girl. But thank you. How about we make breakfast together? The kitchen routine was choreographed from years of single-parent survival, though. Declan still marveled that he'd somehow ended up responsible for 3 children he'd never expected to raise. Emma was the ringleader, bold and curious despite her deafness. Her sisters Ava and Zoe were still asleep, giving Declan a few precious minutes alone with his oldest. He mixed pancake batter while Emma arranged blueberries by size, her need for order expressing itself in small rituals that made the chaos manageable. She tugged on his sleeve, signing a question that made his throat close. Are we going to see the music today? Declan knelt beside her. What music, sweetheart? Her hands moved with the careful precision of someone describing something important. The music in the floor. That you make with the big box. She meant the subwoofer he'd borrowed from a friend, the one that sent vibrations through the floorboards strong enough for the girls to feel. He'd played it for them exactly twice, watching their faces light up with wonder as they experienced rhythm through their bones rather than their ears. Not today, Emma. Maybe this weekend. Her face fell and Declan felt the familiar guilt of disappointing her. But guess what? I got a special job this weekend, taking care of 3 other little girls who are just like you. Emma's eyes widened. Like me, how? They can't hear either. But they can feel music the same way you do. Emma considered this with the gravity only a 4-year-old could bring to such revelations. Will you teach them about the floor music if I can? If their mom will let me? The subway to Grandma's house ate an hour of mourning, but daycare cost money. Declan didn't have, especially not with 3 children to feed and clothe and keep in the specialized supplies their deafness required. His ex-mother-in-law met them at the door, her expression softening when she saw all 3 girls. You look exhausted, Declan. I'm fine, Maureen. She gave him the look that meant she knew he was lying but would allow it for now. The girls kissed him goodbye with sticky blueberry lips. Emma lingered, her hands moving one more time. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, extraordinary girl. And you're not trouble. You're perfect. The trip back downtown took another hour. By the time he reached Hartford Industries, the morning had already consumed most of his remaining energy. He'd been working building maintenance here for 6 months, the kind of invisible labor that kept expensive machinery running and important people comfortable. The pay was better than his previous gig, and the overnight shift meant he could spend days with the girls when they weren't with Maureen. The building supervisor found him in the janitorial supply room, inventory clipboard in hand. Cross, I need you for special assignment this weekend. Declan didn't look up from counting mop heads. I work building maintenance, not special assignments. The supervisor pushed a folder across the supply shelf. It's the Hartford estate, personal residence. Owner just fired her 14th caregiver. Needs someone to cover the weekend shift. Triple your normal rate. Declan's hand stopped mid-count. Triple. What's the catch? You'll be watching 3 kids, special needs, deaf, 4 years old. The supervisor's expression said he expected refusal. Declan thought about the stack of overdue bills on his kitchen counter. Emma's birthday was in 9 days. The math wasn't complicated, and something else tugged at him too, something he couldn't quite name. 3 deaf girls same age as his daughters. The coincidence felt significant. When do I start Friday evening? The supervisor slid a security badge across the shelf. Good man. Declan pocketed the badge and returned to counting mops, trying not to think about the last time he had been trusted with children who needed more than he knew how to give. His phone buzzed during lunch break. Unknown number. The text message didn't make sense. About Emma Hartford. Central Park, 3 p.m. Bring the children. Declan read it twice. Confusion mounting. What children? He was about to delete it when he remembered the folder the supervisor had given him. He pulled it out, flipped to the resident information page. Owner, Genevieve Hartford. Current residence. 3 foster children, female age 4, profound hearing loss. Previous address, Mercy Heights Medical Center. Origin unknown, discovered during facility fire 4 years prior. The bottom dropped out of Declan's stomach. 4 years ago, he had been working night security at Mercy Heights. He had carried babies out of the smoke, their cries silent in his arms as he navigated corridors filled with toxic air and collapsing infrastructure. He had assumed someone would claim them, explain them, give them back to whoever had lost them in the chaos. Instead, they had disappeared into the system. 3 months later, unable to forget their small faces, Declan had navigated the bureaucracy and started adoption proceedings. The social worker had been surprised by his interest. "You're 28 single working nights. Are you sure you can handle 3 infants with special needs?" He wasn't sure of anything except that those babies had no one else, and he couldn't walk away from that. The paperwork called them Jane Doe 1, 2, and 3. Declan called them Emma, Ava, and Zoe, names he'd chosen from a baby book he'd shoplifted from a drugstore because he couldn't afford to buy it. Now someone wanted him to bring them to Central Park. Someone who knew about Emma Hartford. Someone who thought Declan had answers he didn't possess. He checked the time. 2:15. The mansion was in Westchester, easily 40 minutes away. If he left now, fabricated some excuse about a family emergency, he could pick up the Hartford children and still make it to the park. His supervisor would write him up. He'd probably lose the weekend gig. But the text message carried the weight of something that couldn't be ignored, the same gravity that had pulled him into that burning building 4 years ago when every instinct screamed to run the other direction. Declan was out the door before he could talk himself into sense. The mansion was exactly as cold as Genevieve had made it. She stood in the therapy room doorway and watched Lily, Rose, and Iris perform their afternoon routine with mechanical precision. Lily stacked blocks by color. Rose traced shapes on her tablet. Iris rocked slightly, self-soothing. Her eyes focused on something no one else could see. They were beautiful children. Perfect even in the way that broke Genevieve's heart every time she looked at them. They had Emma's coloring, her delicate bone structure, the same devastating combination of vulnerability and strength. But they weren't Emma. They would never be Emma. And Genevieve's attempts to love them felt like infidelity to the daughter she had lost. The text message on her phone might as well have been written in fire. "She's alive. Central Park. 3 o'clock. Genevieve had made it to her car twice, turned the engine on, put it in reverse. Both times she had killed the ignition before reaching the end of the driveway. This was how grief worked, she knew. It sent phantom signals, false hope dressed up as divine intervention. She had learned not to trust sudden certainty or unexpected messages, or the feeling that somewhere, somehow, Emma was waiting to be found. But she had also learned that ignoring these signals was its own kind of death. At 2:40, she told the girls to get in the car. They obeyed without question, the way they always did, strapping themselves into their car seats with practiced efficiency. Genevieve watched them in the rearview mirror as she drove south toward the city. 3 small faces reflecting passing scenery with the same neutral expression. "Do you understand where we're going?" Of course they didn't. They couldn't hear her, and she had never bothered to learn more than basic sign language. The guilt of that failure sat in her throat like a stone. Central Park at 3 o'clock carried the particular energy of autumn weekends, families and joggers and tourists creating layers of motion that made Genevieve's skin crawl. She parked in the underground garage and led the girls toward Bethesda Fountain, the location her phone had pinged when she demanded specifics. The fountain's angel presided over the scene with bronze indifference. Genevieve positioned herself near the edge of the plaza, the girls clustered around her legs like ducklings, and waited for the universe to either deliver a miracle or confirm her insanity. The man appeared from the crowd without fanfare, mid-30s maybe, with the build of someone who worked with his hands and the face of someone who had learned to expect disappointment. He carried himself with careful humility, work boots and worn jeans and a jacket that had seen better decades. 3 small girls walked beside him, and Genevieve's world tilted sideways. Because the little girl in the middle, the one with dark curls and careful steps, turned her head at just the right angle to catch the afternoon sun. Her eyes flashed that impossible green-blue, the exact shade that had haunted Genevieve's dreams for 4 years. The coffee cup in Genevieve's hand slipped from her fingers and shattered against the concrete brown liquid spreading across the plaza like accusation. The man noticed immediately, protective instinct pulling him between Genevieve and the children. "Ma'am, you okay?" His voice carried working-class edges. Brooklyn may be softened by genuine concern. Genevieve couldn't form words. Her hand raised without permission, one finger extending toward the little girl whose eyes were still locked on hers. The girl tilted her head, curious, and waved. The gesture was innocent, automatic, but it revealed her left wrist where a birthmark in the shape of a heart interrupted the pale skin. Genevieve's knees buckled. She caught herself on the fountain's edge, gasping like she'd been underwater. No. The word came out strangled. Emma had that exact birthmark. The man's expression shifted from concern to confusion. Who's Emma? Genevieve's finger was still pointing, still shaking. My daughter. She died 4 years ago in a fire. She had that birthmark. Exactly that birthmark. On her left wrist. The little girl, drawn by Genevieve's distress, or perhaps by something deeper, approached without fear. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small object, offering it to Genevieve with both hands. It was a bracelet. Silver, tarnished with age, the chain missing several links. Genevieve took it with trembling fingers and turned it over to read the engraving that she already knew in her bones would be there. E.H. Emma love, always. Mama. The world stopped spinning. Sound ceased. Time became irrelevant. Genevieve stared at the bracelet in her palm, the one she had placed on her daughter's wrist the morning before the fire, the one that should have been destroyed in the flames or buried with whatever remained of the infant the hospital had declared lost. Where did you get this? Her voice came from somewhere outside her body. The little girl couldn't hear the question, but she must have sensed its importance because she pointed to her own chest. Mine. The man stepped forward, his earlier concern sharpening into something defensive. What's happening? Who are you? Genevieve's eyes snapped to his face. Who am I? Who are you? Why does this child have my daughter's bracelet? The man's hands came up, placating. Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. I found these girls 4 years ago. Mercy Heights fire. I was night security. They were abandoned. I got them out. Genevieve felt static building in her skull. Found them. You found them. Where? By the emergency exit. 3 babies in a crib. No one around. Building coming down. I carried them out. Genevieve's breath came in short bursts, now hyperventilation threatening at the edges. Mercy Heights. That's where Emma was. That's where I lost her. The man's face drained of color. Your daughter was at Mercy Heights. Genevieve's laugh was unhinged. I gave birth there. Underground ward, high-risk pregnancy. There was a fire. The nurse took Emma, said she'd bring her out. When I woke up, they said my baby was gone. Lost. Probably dead. But you're telling me you found 3 babies. The man's voice dropped to something like reverence. I didn't know. The record said no family. Jane Doe times 3. I waited 3 months. No one claimed them. So I started the adoption process. A crowd was forming now, phones rising, people filming this impossible collision. Genevieve barely registered them. You adopted my daughter. The man's jaw set. I adopted 3 little girls who had no one. Genevieve's voice cracked. They had me. The man looked at the children clustered around his legs, then at Genevieve's 3 foster daughters who had gravitated toward the scene with vacant curiosity, then back at Genevieve. We need to talk, somewhere not here, somewhere the cameras can't follow. Before either of them could move, a new voice cut through the chaos. Ms. Hartford, Mr. Cross, I believe I can help. Both of them turned. The man who approached wore a suit that cost more than Declan's monthly rent. His silver hair precisely styled his smile, carrying the particular warmth of a snake that had learned to pass for human. My name is Dr. Silas Crow. I was the director of Mercy Heights 4 years ago. I've been waiting for this meeting for quite some time. Genevieve's skin went cold. Crow. She knew that name. He had signed the death certificate. He had told her Emma was gone. He had looked her in the eye and promised they had searched everywhere. And now he stood before her with that practiced smile, acting as if running into the mother of a supposedly dead child was just another Tuesday afternoon. What do you want? Genevieve's voice could have cut glass. Dr. Crow's smile never wavered. I want to help you both understand what really happened that night. But not here. Not with all these phones recording. He produced a business card from his jacket pocket. My office. 8 o'clock tonight. Come alone. Or don't come at all. He glanced at the 3 little girls clustered around Declan. But if you want to know the truth about these children, you'll be there. He disappeared into the crowd before either of them could respond. Genevieve and Declan stood in the Fountain Plaza, strangers bound by impossible circumstance, while 6 little girls played in the space between them, oblivious to the fact that their entire world was about to be reconstructed from lies. Security officers arrived, drawn by the crowd and the obvious distress. One of them, younger than his uniform, suggested he should be tried to separate Genevieve and Declan. We've had reports of a disturbance. Everyone needs to calm down. Genevieve's lawyer voice activated automatically. There's no disturbance. We're having a conversation. The officer looked unconvinced. Ma'am, people are saying you accused this man of kidnapping. Genevieve's eyes locked with Declan's across the space. Did I? Declan's expression was unreadable. I don't know. Did you? The little girl with the birthmark, the one who might be Emma, or might be a cosmic joke, pushed between them and grabbed both their hands. She made a gesture with her free fingers, quick and certain. Declan's face shifted. What did she say? He swallowed hard. She asked if you're her mother. The security officer's radio crackled with dispatch noise. The crowd pressed closer, phones still recording. Genevieve looked down at this child who carried her daughter's birthmark and wore her daughter's bracelet, and asked questions that shouldn't be possible. I don't know, baby, but I'm going to find out. She raised her eyes to Declan. 48 hours. Give me 48 hours to prove these children are mine. Declan's hands clenched at his sides. And if they are, what then? Do I just disappear? Do you take them and pretend I never existed? Genevieve had no answer that wouldn't be a lie. The security officer was calling for backup. The little girl was still holding both their hands, creating a bridge between 2 people who should have been enemies. Dr. Crow's business card felt like a stone in Genevieve's pocket. And somewhere in the background, cameras kept rolling, uploading this moment to platforms that would make it immortal whether they wanted it or not. Declan broke first. I'll meet you at his office, 8 o'clock. But I'm bringing the girls, all 3 of them. Genevieve nodded. I'll bring mine. Declan's eyebrows rose. Yours? Genevieve gestured to Lily, Rose, and Iris, who stood near the fountain watching the chaos with their characteristic detachment. I foster 3 deaf girls, 4 years old, from Mercy Heights, 4 years ago. The color drained from Declan's face for the second time. How many babies were in that building? Genevieve's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. The security officers were insisting on statements, now pulling Genevieve and Declan toward separate areas of the plaza. The little girl with the birthmark started crying soundless tears that broke something fundamental in Genevieve's chest. She reached for the child, uncertain, unpracticed, but the girl came willingly, pressing her face against Genevieve's shoulder. Declan watched with an expression that mixed grief and acceptance, and something that might have been relief. She's never done that with strangers. Genevieve's arms wrapped around the small body instinctively. Maybe I'm not a stranger. The afternoon light was fading now, autumn sun dropping toward the skyline, painting everything in shades of amber and loss. Genevieve held this child who might be her daughter, watching Declan gather his other 2 girls with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been doing it alone for years. Their eyes met across the plaza one more time, and Genevieve understood with sudden certainty that whatever Dr. Crow revealed tonight, whatever truth lay buried in the ashes of Mercy Heights, neither of them would walk away from it unchanged. The little girl in her arms made another gesture, fingers moving in patterns Genevieve couldn't interpret. What's she saying? Declan's voice carried across the space, rough with emotion. She wants to know if she can stay with you. Genevieve's throat closed around words that wouldn't come. I don't know, baby. I don't know what happens next. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was going to that office. She was going to hear what Silas Crow had spent 4 years hiding. And if these children were hers, If Emma had somehow survived and multiplied and been scattered across this impossible city, then God help anyone who tried to take them from her again. The security officers were waiting for answers. The crowd was still filming. 6 little girls stood in various states of confusion, their lives balanced on the edge of revelation. And somewhere in Westchester, an empty mansion waited to either become a home or confirm its status as a mausoleum. Genevieve loosened her grip on the child, setting her gently on the ground. The girl immediately ran back to Declan, seeking the comfort of the familiar. It should have hurt. Instead, it clarified everything. 8 o'clock. Genevieve's voice was steel. Don't be late. Declan nodded once, then gathered all 3 of his girls and disappeared into the autumn crowd, just another single father navigating the chaos of New York. Genevieve stood alone with her foster daughters, the weight of the silver bracelet burning in her palm, and wondered how many more impossible things she would have to believe before the day was through. The security officers had questions. She answered them on autopilot, her mind already racing ahead to the conversation that waited in Silas Crow's office. By the time she reached her car, the sun had set completely. She drove north toward the mansion in darkness, the bracelet on the passenger seat catching streetlight and throwing fragments of reflection across the dashboard. Behind her, Lily Rose and Iris sat in perfect silence, and for the first time since bringing them home, Genevieve wondered if she had been looking at the answer all along without knowing how to ask the right question. The mansion's gates opened automatically, sensors recognizing her car. She pulled into the circular drive and killed the engine. For a moment she just sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing in the reality of what the afternoon had delivered. Then she got out, helped the girls from their car seats, and led them inside to the therapy room where schedules and protocols waited to impose order on chaos. But order was an illusion now. The text message had shattered it. The bracelet had destroyed it. And tonight in Dr. Silas Crow's office, whatever remained of Genevieve's carefully constructed world would either be rebuilt from truth or collapse entirely under the weight of 4 years of lies. She set the bracelet on the mantel above the fireplace that had never been lit. The silver caught the overhead lights, winking like a promise or a threat. Then she checked her watch. 5 hours until 8 o'clock. 5 hours to prepare for the conversation that would either give her back her daughter or confirm that hope was just another word for torture. The girls were already settling into their evening routine muscle memory, guiding them through dinner and bath time and the elaborate ritual that preceded sleep. Genevieve watched them from the doorway, really looked at them for the first time in months. Lily's eyes, Rose's stubborn chin, Iris's habit of tilting her head when she concentrated. Details she had catalogued as coincidence suddenly rearranged themselves into a pattern that made her knees weak. What if they weren't just 3 deaf girls she had fostered out of guilt and grief? What if they were the answer to a question she hadn't known how to ask? What if Emma hadn't died alone but had been born with sisters, and the fire had scattered them, and Declan Cross had saved 3, while Genevieve's mind had only been able to process 1? Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Don't be late, Ms. Hartford. The truth is waiting. She deleted it immediately, paranoia spiking. How many people had her number? How many knew where she would be tonight? The afternoon's encounter had been public enough to generate witnesses, but this felt different. This felt like surveillance. She called her lawyer, Malcolm Gray, and left a voicemail that tried to summarize the afternoon's insanity in 30 seconds. Then she called her assistant and rescheduled tomorrow's meetings. Then she stood in the center of her too-quiet mansion and waited for the hours to pass. At 7:30 she dressed in the armor of professionalism, suit heels, hair pulled back, war paint for a battle she didn't know how to win. She told the girls she would be back late, though they couldn't hear her, and left them with the overnight nurse she had hired after caregiver 14 quit. The drive into the city felt like descending into the underworld, each mile bringing her closer to the moment when everything she thought she knew would be tested against reality. Dr. Silas Crow's office occupied the top floor of a building in Midtown that probably cost more per square foot than most people earned in a year. The receptionist was gone for the evening, but the elevator opened directly into a waiting room that suggested old money and older secrets. Genevieve stepped out her heels, silent on carpet thick enough to absorb sound and sin equally. Declan was already there. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city lights with the expression of someone who had already accepted that the night would destroy him. He turned when the elevator chimed. "Ms. Hartford." His voice was careful, formal. She matched his tone. "Mr. Cross." They stood on opposite sides of the waiting room. Two strangers bound by children who might belong to both of them, and waited for the man who held all the answers to let them in. The door to the inner office opened at exactly 8 o'clock. Dr. Silas Crow stood in the doorway, that practiced smile still in place. "Right on time. Please, both of you, come in." Crow's inner office smelled like leather and lies. The desk was mahogany, the kind that came from trees older than the building itself, and the walls held diplomas from institutions that Genevieve recognized from her own tax-deductible donations. The doctor settled into his chair with the ease of a man who had spent decades making terrible decisions look like medical necessity. He gestured to the two seats across from him. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Genevieve remained standing. Declan mirrored her instinctively, both of them refusing the vulnerability that sitting would create. Crow's smile thinned but held. "Very well. Let's begin with what you think you know. 4 years ago, Ms. Hartford, you were admitted to Mercy Heights for an emergency delivery. High-risk pregnancy, 32 weeks preeclampsia threatening both you and the fetus. You were told you were carrying one child, a girl, Emma." The name in his mouth felt like desecration. Genevieve's fingers curled into fists at her sides. "You told me Emma died in the fire?" Crow opened a folder on his desk, not bothering to glance at the contents. "I told you we couldn't find her. There's a difference." Declan's voice came from her left, rough with the day's accumulating damage. "I found 3 babies that night. Not 1. 3. Where did the other 2 come from?" Crow leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "That's the question, isn't it?" He pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the desk. "This is Ms. Hartford's original intake form." Genevieve stepped forward, scanning the medical jargon until her eyes snagged on the relevant line. "Number of fetuses 3. Her vision swam. "That's not possible. I had 1 ultrasound, 1 heartbeat, 1 baby." "You had the ultrasound we showed you." Crow's voice carried the practiced patience of a man explaining basic arithmetic to a child. The actual medical imaging told a different story. "Triplets. Identical. High-risk pregnancy complicated by genetic factors we were testing at the time." Genevieve's throat constricted. "Testing. What kind of testing?" Crow's expression remained neutral. "Experimental gene therapy, designed to ensure all 3 survived to term. Your consent form is in the file." Declan moved before Genevieve could process the implications, crossing to the desk and yanking the folder toward him. He flipped pages with shaking hands until he found the consent form. The signature at the bottom was Genevieve's, but the date made her stomach drop. "This is from my first trimester. I was barely conscious. They said it was standard prenatal care." Crow's shrug was almost apologetic. "The definition of standard has always been flexible in research hospitals." Genevieve's mind raced through the implications, trying to build a framework that would hold this new reality without collapsing under its weight. "If I had triplets, why did you only tell me about 1? Why hide the others?" Crow stood, moving to the window where Declan had been standing minutes before. "Because 2 of them weren't supposed to survive. The gene therapy was experimental, risky. We needed a control group and test subjects. You were told about Emma because she was the control. The other 2 received the intervention." The room tilted. Genevieve gripped the edge of the desk. "You experimented on my unborn children without my knowledge." Crow's reflection in the window showed no remorse. "We saved their lives, all 3, against considerable odds. You should be thanking me." Declan's voice cut through the space like a blade. "Then why the fire? Why destroy the evidence? Why let this woman think her daughter was dead?" Crow turned from the window, and for the first time his mask slipped enough to show the calculation beneath. The fire was unfortunate, a malfunction in the electrical system, but it provided an opportunity to close a program that had become politically complicated. The gene therapy worked too well. All 3 babies survived, thrived, but they were deaf. Profoundly so. The funding source didn't consider that an acceptable outcome. Genevieve's laugh was caustic enough to strip paint. "So you burned the evidence." "Literally." Crow's hands spread in a gesture of manufactured helplessness. "I contained a potential scandal. The babies were listed as Jane Does placed in the system, and everyone moved forward. You recovered Ms. Hartford, built an empire. Mr. Cross provided a home for 3 children who would have been lost in foster care. Everyone benefited, except me." Genevieve's voice could have frozen blood. "I spent 4 years mourning a daughter who was alive." Crow's expression didn't change. Grief is an acceptable price for progress. Declan crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his fist connecting with Crow's jaw before Genevieve could move to stop him. The doctor stumbled back, catching himself on the windowsill, blood trickling from his lip. The violence should have shocked her. Instead, Genevieve felt a savage satisfaction that someone had finally made this man bleed. Crow touched his mouth, examining the blood with clinical detachment. "That was unwise, Mr. Cross. I could press charges. Try it." Declan's voice was razored calm. "I'll tell every news outlet in the city what you just admitted." Crow's smile returned, crimson-stained. And who would believe a janitor over a respected physician? Genevieve stepped forward, inserting herself between the 2 men. "I would, with my lawyers and my money and every connection I've built over 4 years. You want a war doctor? I'll bury you in litigation until your grandchildren are paying legal fees." The threat landed. Crow's confidence wavered at the edges. "What do you want?" Genevieve pulled out her phone. "DNA tests. All 6 girls. Full genetic workup. 48 hours. Crow considered this. "And if the tests confirm what I've told you?" "What then?" Genevieve's smile was sharper than his had ever been. "Then you'll pray. I decide the justice system is sufficient vengeance." Crow moved to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a business card for a private laboratory. "This facility is discreet. Fast. Tell them I sent you. They'll prioritize the work." He handed the card to Genevieve, then looked at Declan. "But understand something, both of you. If those children are Ms. Hartford's biological daughters, and you've been raising them without legal authority, Mr. Cross, you could face kidnapping charges, even if your intentions were pure." The words hit Declan like a physical blow. Genevieve watched his face drain of color, watched 4 years of love and sacrifice recalculate into potential criminal liability. "That's absurd. He saved them." Crow's expression held no mercy. "The law doesn't care about nuance, only documentation. And Mr. Cross's adoption papers are based on false information. Information I provided, yes, but information he should have questioned. Any competent prosecutor could make that case." Genevieve's mind shifted into strategy mode, the same calculation she used in boardroom negotiations when the other side showed their hand. "You're threatening him to keep me from going after you." Crow's silence was confirmation enough. She turned to Declan. "Don't say anything else, not without a lawyer." Declan's jaw worked, emotion warring with survival instinct. "I don't have money for lawyers." Genevieve met his eyes. "I do. And if those girls are mine, then you've been protecting my daughters for 4 years, while I had the resources to do it myself, and failed. That deserves more than I can ever repay." The admission cost her something, saying it out loud in front of this man who had orchestrated so much suffering. But it was also the first true thing she had said all day. Crow must have sensed the shift, because his posture changed defensive now where before he had been smugly confident. "I want immunity, full immunity for my role in the gene therapy program and the subsequent concealment, in writing, before any tests are run." Genevieve didn't hesitate. "Done. But you provide every file, every record, every piece of documentation related to my pregnancy and those children, and you stay available for questions. One hint that you're running and the deal evaporates." Crow extended his hand. "We have an agreement." Genevieve ignored the gesture, turning instead to Declan. "We need to get the girls to that lab. Tonight." Declan nodded, still processing the implications of potential charges. "I left them with my neighbor. I can pick them up." Genevieve pulled out her phone. "I'll call the facility. Make sure they're ready for us." They left Crow's office together, the elevator ride down passing in taut silence. The street outside was blessedly anonymous, late-evening crowds providing cover from the afternoon spectacle. Declan broke first. "Why are you helping me? You could take those girls and disappear. Leave me to face whatever legal mess is coming." Genevieve studied his profile, seeing the fear beneath the exhaustion. "Because you loved them when I couldn't. That matters." The words hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Declan's hand shook as he pulled out his phone. "I'll meet you at the lab. 1 hour." Genevieve nodded, then caught his arm before he could leave. "If they're mine, we'll figure it out. Together. I'm not Emma's father." Declan's voice cracked on the admission. "I have no biological claim, no legal standing, just 4 years of changing diapers and learning sign language and wondering if I'm enough. You're enough." The certainty in Genevieve's voice surprised them both. "You're more than enough." Declan's eyes held hers for a moment longer, then he turned and disappeared into the crowd. Genevieve stood alone on the sidewalk, the laboratory card heavy in her pocket, and pulled up her driver's contact. She needed to get home, collect her 3 girls, and bring them to a sterile facility where strangers would swab their cheeks and confirm what her heart already knew with terrifying certainty. The drive to Westchester passed in a blur of exit signs and strategy. She called Malcolm Gray, her lawyer, and left another message summarizing Crow's admissions. Then she called her assistant and authorized a wire transfer to the laboratory for priority processing. Money couldn't buy truth, but it could buy speed, and right now, velocity was the only advantage she had. The mansion felt different when she entered it, as if the walls had absorbed the afternoon's revelations and rearranged themselves accordingly. The overnight nurse met her in the foyer with the practiced calm of someone paid enough not to ask questions. "The girls are in the therapy room. They've been restless all evening." Genevieve moved past her without responding, drawn toward the one-way mirror where she had spent so many hours watching Lily Rose and Iris exist in their carefully controlled environment. They weren't sitting in their designated spots anymore. Instead, they had clustered together on the floor near the window, their small bodies forming a triangle of mutual comfort. Lily's hand rested on Rose's shoulder. Iris leaned against both of them, her eyes closed. They looked like sisters. They looked like family. They looked like children who had been waiting their entire short lives for someone to see them clearly. Genevieve entered the therapy room, and 3 pairs of eyes turned toward her with perfect synchronization. She knelt on the floor in front of them, bringing herself to their level. "We're going on a trip. Tonight. It's important." None of them could hear her words, but they must have understood the urgency because they stood without protest and moved toward the door with the fluid cooperation of people who had learned to read the world through vibration and instinct rather than sound. The drive back into the city took 40 minutes traffic lighter now that rush hour had passed. Genevieve watched the girls in the rearview mirror, searching their faces for evidence of the genetic connection she had missed for 6 months. Lily had her mother's chin. Rose had her stubborn streak visible even in silence. And Iris quiet. Iris had the same habit of tilting her head when processing information that Genevieve saw in her own reflection every morning. The laboratory occupied a converted brownstone in the medical district, its facade deliberately unremarkable. Genevieve parked in the underground garage and led the girls through a private entrance where a technician waited with the kind of professional courtesy that came from late-night retainer fees. "Ms. Hartford, we're ready for you. The samples will be processed immediately. Results in 48 hours as requested." Declan was already there, sitting in the waiting room with 3 girls who must have been the ones he pulled from the fire. They looked exhausted, overwhelmed, their small faces showing the strain of a day that had upended their entire world. The girl with the birthmark saw Genevieve and scrambled from Declan's lap, running across the waiting room with arms outstretched. Genevieve caught her instinctively, this child who might be Emma, or might be some cosmic punishment for Genevieve's failures. The girl's hands moved in quick patterns against Genevieve's chest. Declan's voice came from across the room, translation without judgment. She says you smell like gardens, like the park where we met. Genevieve's throat closed. I don't garden. I don't have time. Declan stood gathering his other two girls. But you did once, didn't you? Before everything fell apart. The observation was too accurate to deny. In another life, before Hartford Industries became her entire identity, Genevieve had maintained a rooftop garden, roses and lavender and herbs she couldn't name anymore. The fire had destroyed that along with everything else. The fact that this child could sense the ghost of it on her skin felt like revelation or prophecy, depending on how much faith Genevieve had left. The technician returned with collection kits explaining the process with practiced efficiency. Cheek swabs. Quick and painless. We'll run full panels on all 6 children and both adults. The biological relationship will be definitive. Genevieve watched as the technician worked through each girl with gentle competence. Lily went first, brave and stoic. Rose squirmed but cooperated. Iris watched the process with solemn intensity before submitting to her own sample. Then came Declan's 3, including the girl with the birthmark who kept glancing at Genevieve as if memorizing her features. When it was Genevieve's turn, she opened her mouth and let the technician scrape cells from her cheek, this mundane violation, feeling like the most intimate thing she had done in years. Then Declan, who submitted to the process with the resignation of someone who had stopped trying to control outcomes. The technician sealed the samples in containers that would travel to machines that would unravel 4 years of lies in the space of 48 hours. You'll both receive results simultaneously. The technician handed them each a card with login credentials for the secure portal. I recommend you arrange to review them together. These situations can be emotionally complicated. Genevieve pocketed the card. We'll manage. The technician's expression suggested doubt, but professional discretion won. Of course. We'll be in touch. The waiting room emptied as support staff disappeared into back offices. Genevieve and Declan stood on opposite sides of the space. 6 exhausted children between them, creating a living barrier to any easy resolution. We should go. Declan's voice was hollow. Get some sleep. As if that's possible. Genevieve's laugh was brittle. Declan's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile in better circumstances. Fair point. The girl with the birthmark pulled on Declan's hand, signing something urgent. He knelt, bringing his face level with hers, and his expression crumbled. What did she say? Genevieve's question came out softer than intended. Declan stood wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. She wants to know if she's going to lose me. If finding her real mother means saying goodbye to her daddy. The word daddy in his mouth, applied to a child who might be Genevieve's, created a cognitive dissonance that made her dizzy. How do you answer that? Declan's shoulders sagged. I don't. I tell her I love her and tomorrow will sort itself out, and adults don't always know what happens next. It's the only truth I have left. Genevieve moved before thought could stop her, crossing the space to kneel beside the girl. The child's eyes, that impossible green-blue, tracked her movement with careful attention. Genevieve raised her hands and made the only sign she knew with absolute certainty, the one Dr. Bennett had taught her months ago when she first brought the foster girls home. I love you. The girl's face transformed wonder, replacing fear, and her hands flew in response. Declan's voice came from above, thick with emotion. She says she loves you too. She says she's been waiting for you. The statement detonated in Genevieve's chest. She pulled the girl close, feeling small arms wrap around her neck with desperate strength, and something she had locked away 4 years ago cracked open and bled into the sterile air of the laboratory waiting room. When she finally released the embrace, she found Declan watching with an expression she couldn't parse. We need ground rules. For the next 48 hours. Until we know. Agreed. Declan's response was immediate. What do you propose? Genevieve stood, mind shifting back to negotiation mode. The girls stay in their current situations. No disruption to routine until we have answers. We both stay accessible. No lawyers, no press, no preemptive moves. Declan considered this. And after, when we know, Genevieve met his eyes. Then we figure out what's best for them. Not for us. For them. The promise felt enormous, cosmic in its implications. Declan extended his hand. Deal. Genevieve took it, their palms meeting in a handshake that sealed a pact neither of them fully understood yet. His hand was calloused rough from work, warm in a way that made her conscious of how cold her own skin had become over the years of building walls between herself and anything that could hurt her. They separated, each gathering their respective 3 girls, and headed for their separate vehicles. Genevieve was halfway to her car when her phone buzzed. Text from unknown number. The message was short, devastating in its simplicity. Lab results can be influenced. For a price. Consider this before trusting science over instinct. She stared at the screen, ice flooding her veins. Someone was watching. Someone knew about the tests. Someone wanted her to doubt whatever answers emerged. She turned, scanning the parking garage for cameras or observers, but found only shadows and the distant sound of Declan's van starting. Another text arrived. Or perhaps you'd prefer to avoid the tests altogether. Shared custody. Mutual silence. Everyone wins. Genevieve deleted both messages and climbed into her car, mind racing through the implications. Crow had said the lab was discreet, but discretion was currency in a city like New York. Someone had been bought, or someone was operating their own agenda. The drive home passed in paranoid hyper-awareness, every car behind her a potential tail, every streetlight a point of surveillance. By the time she reached the mansion, her hands ached from gripping the wheel. The girls sensed her tension clustering close as she led them inside and up to their bedrooms. The overnight nurse had left her shift concluded, leaving Genevieve alone with 3 children who might be her daughters, and the crushing weight of decisions that would determine all their futures. She checked the security system twice, then a third time before retreating to her own bedroom. The silver bracelet still sat on the mantel downstairs, evidence of a past she couldn't trust and a present that made even less sense. Her phone buzzed again. This time the text came from a number she recognized: Malcolm Gray, her lawyer. Saw your messages. This is insane. Call me first thing tomorrow. We need to discuss strategy. Strategy. As if this were a business deal that could be optimized through proper positioning and leverage. Genevieve set the phone aside and moved to the window, looking out over grounds that cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Declan was probably doing the same calculation from the opposite end of the economic spectrum. 24 hours ago they had been strangers. Now they were bound together by children and secrets, and the terrible possibility that neither of them had the right to the lives they had been living. Sleep was theoretical. Genevieve spent the night alternating between reviewing files on her laptop and checking on the girls who slept in perfect silence down the hall. Lily snored slightly, a fact that made Genevieve smile despite the circumstances. Rose had kicked off her blankets, sprawled across the bed in unconscious abandon. Iris clutched a stuffed rabbit that Genevieve had never seen her touch during waking hours. Dawn arrived with the subtle cruelty of inevitability. Genevieve made coffee she didn't drink and answered emails she couldn't focus on. The girls woke at their usual time, moving through morning routines with the practiced efficiency of people who lived by schedule rather than spontaneity. She wanted to change that. The realization arrived fully formed, bypassing rational analysis. She wanted to teach them that mornings could be lazy, that routines could be broken, that life didn't have to be a series of protocols designed to prevent feeling. Her phone rang at 8:15. Declan's name appeared on the screen and she answered before the second ring. "Did you get texts last night?" His voice was rough with exhaustion. "About the lab, about bribes and alternative arrangements." "Yes." Genevieve's heart rate accelerated. "Someone's trying to manipulate us. Question is who and why." Declan's pause carried weight. "Crow. Has to be. He wants us scared enough to walk away from official answers. Accept his version without verification." Genevieve considered this. Or someone else who benefits from confusion. Someone who doesn't want the truth exposed. Declan's breath hitched. "Dylan, your ex-husband. You said he walked out when Emma was born. What if he knew about the triplets? What if he's been paying Crow all along to keep them hidden?" The theory crystallized with horrifying plausibility. Dylan had money connections and motivation to bury anything that complicated his carefully curated public image. A wife who had nearly died in childbirth. 3 disabled daughters. The potential scandal of illegal medical experimentation. All of it could have been weaponized against him if it became public. Better to walk away, pay for silence, and rebuild his life without the inconvenient weight of family. We need to know who sent those texts. Genevieve's mind was already calculating next moves. I'll have my security team trace the numbers. Declan's laugh was bitter. Your security team? Must be nice having resources. Genevieve bristled. I'd trade every dollar for 4 years with my daughters. Don't presume you understand my life. I'm not. Declan's voice softened. I'm just saying the playing field isn't level. Never has been. If this becomes a custody fight, money wins. We both know that. The acknowledgement hung between them, uncomfortable in its honesty. Genevieve took a breath, forcing herself past defensiveness. Then we make sure it doesn't become a fight. We present a unified front. Show the court, if it comes to that we're both committed to what's best for them. Declan's silence stretched long enough that she thought the connection had dropped. You'd really do that? Risk your advantage to partner with a janitor? You're not just a janitor. The words came easier than she expected. You're the person who saved my daughters when I couldn't. That makes you family, whether either of us wanted it or not. Declan's breath caught audibly. Family. I haven't had that word apply to anyone but Wren in a long time. Genevieve's chest tightened. Then maybe it's time we both learned what it could mean. The conversation ended with promises to stay in contact, to share information, to resist the paranoia that threatened to split them apart. Genevieve set the phone down and found Lily standing in the doorway, watching her with solemn intensity. The girl crossed the room and climbed into Genevieve's lap without invitation, settling against her chest with the casual trust of someone who had decided the world was safe enough to risk affection. Genevieve's arms wrapped around the small body, automatically muscle memory from a motherhood she had barely experienced before it was stolen. Lily's heartbeat was steady against her palm, a metronome counting down the hours until DNA results would either confirm or destroy the fragile ecosystem they were building. The girl's hands moved in quick patterns, signing something Genevieve couldn't interpret. She pulled out her phone and opened the sign language app Dr. Bennett had recommended months ago, showing it to Lily. The girl's fingers moved more slowly this time, repeating the pattern until the app caught it and translated. Are you scared? Genevieve's throat constricted. She typed her response. Yes, very scared. Lily read the screen, then signed again. Me too, but scared together is better than scared alone. The wisdom of it, coming from a 4-year-old who had spent her entire life in silence, made Genevieve's eyes burn with unshed tears. The day passed in suspended animation, every hour bringing them closer to answers that felt increasingly like threats. Malcolm called at noon with legal strategies Genevieve couldn't process. Her assistant called at 2 with crisis management proposals for potential media exposure. The laboratory called at 4 to confirm receipt of samples and timeline for results. Through it all, Genevieve kept her phone close, waiting for either Declan or another anonymous message to shift the landscape again. The shift came at 6:30 in the form of a video file sent from unknown number. Genevieve opened it with trembling hands, bracing for blackmail or threat. Instead, she found surveillance footage from 4 years ago, time-stamped the night of the fire. The camera angle showed the emergency exit where Declan claimed to have found the babies. She watched smoke pour through the corridor, watched a figure in security uniform run toward the exit, watched him emerge moments later carrying not 3 babies but 4. Her hands went numb. The video replayed automatically, showing the same sequence. 4 babies, not 3. 4 bundles wrapped in hospital blankets. Declan carrying them to safety while flames consumed the building behind him. She counted again, freeze-framing at the critical moment. 4, not 3. Not the triplets Crow had described. 4 children pulled from that fire, which meant someone was lying about the number, or about who survived, or about everything. She called Declan immediately. He answered on the first ring. I need you to tell me exactly what happened that night. The fire, the rescue, every detail you remember. His confusion bled through the connection. Why? What's wrong? Because I just received video evidence that you saved 4 babies, not 3, 4. And I need to know where the 4th one went. The silence on his end stretched so long she checked to see if the call had dropped. Then 4 no. There were 3. I'm certain. 3 babies in one crib. I carried them all out together. Genevieve's mind raced. The video doesn't lie. 4 distinct bundles. 4 babies. Which means either your memory is wrong or someone took one of them before you got them to safety. Declan's breathing accelerated into something close to panic. I don't remember 4. I swear to God I only found 3. But it was chaos. Smoke everywhere. Maybe I miscounted. Maybe there was another baby I didn't see. Genevieve rewound the footage again, studying the figure she assumed was Declan. Or maybe someone else was in that corridor. Someone who took the 4th baby before you arrived. Someone who wanted to make sure not all of them made it out. The implications settled between them like poison. Crow. Declan's voice went flat. He said the fire was supposed to destroy evidence. What if it was also supposed to reduce the number of survivors? Make the experiment easier to hide. Genevieve's stomach turned. 3 disabled children could be explained as tragedy. 4 starts to look like a pattern, like something intentional. They stayed on the phone for another 20 minutes, dissecting possibilities and probabilities until exhaustion made coherent thought impossible. Genevieve promised to send him the video file. Declan promised to review his memory for any detail he might have missed. They ended the call with the understanding that 48 hours was now both too long and not nearly enough time to prepare for what the DNA results might reveal. Night fell with the weight of accumulated dread. Genevieve fed the girls dinner they barely touched, bathed them through routines that felt hollow, tucked them into beds that might not be theirs to sleep in much longer. She stood in the hallway between their 3 rooms and felt the future pressing down with the gravity of inevitability. Tomorrow the results would arrive. Tomorrow she would know if these children were hers or if she had been living adjacent to her daughters without recognizing them. Tomorrow everything would change or nothing would, and either option felt like dying. Her phone buzzed one final time. Text from Declan. Whatever happens, we face it together. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a promise neither of them had the power to keep. Genevieve typed back, "Together." Then she turned off her phone, poured herself 3 fingers of scotch she wouldn't drink, and waited for dawn to deliver its verdict on the life she thought she had been building from the ruins of her loss. The email arrived at exactly 7:43 in the morning, 47 hours, and 17 minutes after the samples had been collected. Genevieve was already awake, had been for hours watching the sky transition from black to gray to the particular blue that promised a cold November day. Her phone chimed from the nightstand where she had positioned it with deliberate care, close enough to hear but far enough that checking it required conscious decision. She picked it up with hands that had stopped shaking somewhere around 3 in the morning when shock had calcified into numb acceptance. The subject line read, "DNA analysis results. Confidential." She opened the secure portal, entered credentials she had memorized despite telling herself she wouldn't, and watched the document load with the agonizing patience of a satellite connection from another decade. The results appeared in clinical typography. Black text on white background, numbers and percentages that would rebuild her understanding of reality, or confirm that the past 4 years had been exactly the prison of grief she had constructed. Sample 1. Lily, 99.97% probability of maternal match with Genevieve Hartford. Sample 2. Rose, 99.97% probability of maternal match with Genevieve Hartford. Sample 3. Iris, 99.97% probability of maternal match with Genevieve Hartford. The room contracted around those 3 lines. Genevieve's breath stopped somewhere between her lungs and her throat, creating a vacuum that made thought impossible. She scrolled down muscle memory, driving her past the part of her brain that had ceased functioning. Additional. Finding all 3 subjects share paternal DNA markers consistent with single biological father. Reference Sample 7. Dylan Hartford confirms paternity. Samples 4, 5, and 6 subjects in custody of Declan Cross. No biological relationship to Genevieve Hartford. Sibling relationship probability 99.94% to samples 1, 2, 3. Paternal markers identical. Maternal markers indicate second biological mother. Her finger traced down the lab report to a section she'd almost missed buried in the technical addendum. Additional note surveillance review identified fourth infant at fire scene. Cross-reference with sample 8 requested. She scrolled faster, heart hammering. Sample 8. Ren Cross, age 8. Paternal DNA. Match confirmed Dylan Hartford. Sibling probability to samples 1 to 6, 99.94%. Additional markers indicate separate conception timeline approximately 4 years prior to triplet births. Genevieve's phone clattered against the nightstand. 7 daughters, not 6. 7 children Dylan had fathered and abandoned across 8 years. She dialed Declan with shaking fingers. He answered before the first ring completed, his voice raw with sleeplessness and dread. "Tell me. Just tell me before I lose my mind. They're mine." Genevieve's voice came from somewhere outside her body. "All 3. Lily, Rose, Iris. They're my daughters. 4 years I've had them and didn't know." The silence on his end carried the weight of collapse. Then the others. "My 3. What about them?" Genevieve's throat tightened. "They're your daughter's half-sisters. Same father, different mother. Dylan is listed as biological father of all 6. And Ren." Declan's voice cracked. "The lab tested Ren too." Genevieve pulled up the report again, reading the addendum that made her stomach turn. "Ren is Dylan's daughter, 4 years older than the triplets, which means he had a pattern. He's been abandoning deaf daughters for 8 years. Declan's breathing turned ragged. "I found Ren 3 months after the triplets. Different ward, same hospital system. Social services said she was abandoned. Jane Doe, just like the others. I thought it was coincidence. It wasn't coincidence." Genevieve's mind raced through implications. It was Crow scattering evidence. The 4th baby from the video. He separated her from the triplets to make the pattern harder to trace. Declan's voice went hollow. 7 daughters. Dylan fathered 7 daughters and walked away from all of them because they couldn't hear. What kind of monster does that? The kind we're going to bury in legal consequences. Genevieve was already moving, pulling clothes from her closet with one hand while keeping the phone pressed to her ear. "Meet me at Mercy Heights in 1 hour. The old records building. If there was another mother in that ward, her file will be there." Declan's hesitation was palpable. "That's breaking and entering. We could get arrested." Genevieve's laugh was sharp. After everything Crow did, after 4 years of lies. "I'll take my chances with the justice system." The drive to Mercy Heights took 40 minutes through traffic that seemed designed to test her remaining sanity. The facility had been abandoned since the fire insurance disputes and litigation, keeping it in permanent limbo while nature reclaimed the grounds. Genevieve parked on a side street 2 blocks away, approaching on foot to avoid security cameras that probably no longer functioned but might still record for some distant oversight committee. Declan's van was already there, parked behind a dumpster with the practiced invisibility of someone who knew how to avoid notice. He climbed out as she approached, carrying a duffel bag that clinked with the sound of tools. His face showed the strain of a sleepless night spent processing the reality that he'd been raising his nieces without knowing it. "You're serious about this?" His statement needed no question mark. Genevieve met his eyes. 4 years ago, someone took my daughters and scattered them like they were disposable. I need to know who. I need to know why. And I need to know if there are more." They moved through overgrown grounds where weeds had conquered concrete and graffiti decorated every accessible surface. The main hospital structure loomed to their left windows, shattered roof partially collapsed, a monument to institutional failure. The records building was smaller brick construction that had weathered the fire better than the main facility. Declan tested the ground floor door, found it locked, and applied bolt cutters to the chain securing it. The metal parted with a crack that echoed across the empty campus. Inside, the air smelled of mold and abandonment. Water damage had warped the floors, and ceiling tiles hung at angles that suggested imminent collapse. Declan's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating rows of filing cabinets that stretched toward the back of the building like metal soldiers. Maternity ward. November, 4 years ago. Genevieve started pulling drawers, checking labels that had faded to near illegibility. Declan worked the opposite wall, moving with systematic efficiency. They found the relevant files 15 minutes into the search drawer labeled MW-NOV-2022. Genevieve pulled it open and extracted a stack of manila folders thick with forms and documentation. She spread them on the least damaged desk, sorting by admission date. There. Declan's finger landed on a folder marked Hartford G. Emergency admission. Genevieve opened it, scanning intake forms until she found the detail that made her vision swim. Room assignment MW403. Shared occupancy. Second patient, Cross M. The name detonated in her mind. Declan's hand gripped the desk edge hard enough to whiten his knuckles. Cross. That's my sister's married name, Miranda. But she moved away years ago, cut off contact before the fire. This doesn't make sense. Genevieve flipped through the folder, finding a photocopy of an ID card. The face staring back was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and eyes that carried the particular exhaustion of someone who had been running for a long time. Is this her? Genevieve turned the file toward Declan, his face drained of every drop of blood. That's Miranda. Oh God, that's my sister. She was here. She was pregnant. Genevieve's pulse hammered. In the same room as me, the same night, both of us carrying triplets, both from Dylan. Declan pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I need to call her, right now, make sure she's okay. Wait. Genevieve's hand covered his. Look at the discharge notes. Declan scanned the page, his expression shifting from confusion to horror. Patient status. Deceased. Time of death. 12:43 a.m. Cause smoke inhalation. Body released to Dr. Silas Crow for cremation. Date of death certificate. 3 hours before the fire started. His voice went hollow. That's impossible. You can't file a death certificate before someone dies, unless you're planning to kill them. Genevieve's stomach turned. Unless the fire wasn't an accident, it was a solution. Crow needed to eliminate evidence and witnesses. Miranda was both. Declan's hands shook as he photographed the document. The girls I've been raising. If Miranda was their mother and Crow declared her dead, then I've been caring for my nieces without knowing it. My sister's daughters. Her phone vibrated. Text from unknown number. Stop digging or you'll join Miranda. She showed it to Declan, who pulled out his own phone to reveal an identical message. Someone's watching us. Right now. Genevieve spun toward the window, searching shadows for movement. Declan grabbed the files they'd been reading. We need to leave. Take these and call the police from somewhere public. They ran for the exit files clutched against their chests, flashlights carving erratic paths through the darkness. Behind them, footsteps echoed with the deliberate pace of someone who knew they had time. Genevieve's heart hammered as they burst through the exterior door into daylight that felt like salvation. A figure stood between them and their vehicles, backlit by morning sun, features obscured but posture radiating threat. Going somewhere. Genevieve. The voice was familiar, educated, carrying the particular cruelty of old money, discovering it has been inconvenienced. Dylan stepped forward, and Genevieve saw that 4 years had aged him in ways that suggested guilt or substance abuse, or both. Behind him, 2 men in suits that screamed private security blocked the path to the street. I thought we should talk. About our daughters. About what happens next. Declan moved to shield Genevieve, protective instinct overriding self-preservation. You have no right to call them that. You walked away before they were born. Dylan's smile was thin. I walked away from a complicated situation. Now circumstances have changed. The truth is public. My reputation requires management, and management requires custody. Genevieve stepped around Declan. You want custody? After abandoning 7 children, after conspiring with Crow to hide them. Dylan's expression didn't flicker. I want to control the narrative. Joint custody with their mother, shared parenting with the appearance of reconciliation. The public loves redemption stories. It's perfect. The casual sociopathy of the proposal made Genevieve's blood ice. I would rather burn everything I've built than give you access to them. Dylan pulled out his phone, tapping the screen with deliberate slowness. Then perhaps you'd like to explain to a family court judge why you're trespassing on condemned property, stealing confidential medical records, and involving a man with falsified adoption papers in your children's lives. He turned the phone toward them, showing video footage of their entry into the records building. Time-stamped, date-stamped, admissible in any custody hearing. Declan's hands clenched into fists. You set us up. Dylan's shrug was elegant. I provided opportunity. You chose criminality. Now we can resolve this quietly, or I can make your lives a legal nightmare that lasts years. A new voice cut through the standoff, sharp with authority. Actually, Mr. Hartford, you're the one facing legal consequences. All of them turned toward the records building entrance, where a woman stood flanked by 2 uniformed police officers and a third person holding a professional video camera. The woman was thin to the point of frailty, hair graying prematurely, but her eyes carried the fierce clarity of someone who had survived the unsurvivable and emerged with purpose. My name is Miranda Cross, and I'm here to reclaim my daughters and testify against the men who tried to erase me. Declan's phone clattered against concrete. Miranda. You're alive. The woman's smile was tremulous but real. Barely. But yes. And I've been working with the district attorney for 3 months building a case against Dr. Crow and his accomplices. She gestured to Dylan. Including you. The video you just showed them? We have you on camera threatening witnesses and admitting to conspiracy. The police officers moved forward, positioning themselves between Dylan and the others. Mr. Hartford, we have a warrant for your arrest. Conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying death certificates, obstruction of justice, and accessory to kidnapping. Dylan's composure cracked like ice. This is absurd. I haven't done anything illegal. You can't prove any of this. The officer pulled out handcuffs. Sir, we have Ms. Cross's testimony, hospital records showing payments from your accounts to Dr. Crow and electronic communications you believed were deleted. You can cooperate, or we can make this difficult. Dylan's security detail melted away with the practiced efficiency of people who knew when to abandon a sinking ship. Dylan himself stood frozen, his carefully constructed facade crumbling as the officers moved in. You paid Crow to declare me dead. Miranda's voice was steady despite the emotion bleeding through. You paid him to keep me sedated in a private facility for 4 years while you rebuilt your life without the inconvenience of disabled daughters. Dylan's face went white. You can't prove that. Miranda pulled a folder from her jacket. Bank transfers, emails, medical records showing systematic drugging, and the testimony of the nurse who helped me escape and documented everything. The officers were cuffing Dylan now, reading rights he didn't seem to hear. His eyes locked on Genevieve. You think you've won? Wait until my lawyers tear apart your fitness as a mother. Wait until they expose every mistake you've made. Genevieve's voice was cold as winter. My lawyers are better than yours, and unlike you, I actually want my daughters. That's going to matter in court. The police car pulled away with Dylan still protesting his innocence. Miranda sagged against Declan, who caught her automatically, years of estrangement dissolving in the reality of her survival. I'm sorry. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you I was pregnant, didn't tell you I was in trouble. I thought I could handle Dylan on my own. Declan's arms tightened around her. You're alive. That's all that matters. Everything else we can figure out. One of the officers approached Genevieve. Ms. Hartford, we'll need statements from all of you, and we'll need to arrange emergency custody for the children until this is resolved. Genevieve's spine straightened. The children are safe where they are, all 7 of them. Under my care and Mr. Cross's supervision, there's no reason to disrupt their lives further. The officer looked uncertain. Ma'am, with Mr. Hartford under arrest and Ms. Cross's legal status complicated by years of false documentation, the court will need to determine guardianship. Genevieve pulled out her phone. Then I'll have my lawyers file emergency petitions within the hour. But those children aren't going into the system, not while I have resources to prevent it. The officer exchanged glances with his partner. We'll need to consult with child services. In the meantime, current arrangements can remain pending judicial review tomorrow morning. Family Court 9 a.m. All parties present. Genevieve nodded. We'll be there. The police departed with promises to follow up. Miranda turned to Genevieve, and for the first time the two women who had shared a hospital room 4 years ago stood face to face without chaos mediating. Thank you for taking care of my girls when I couldn't. Miranda's voice was raw. For keeping them safe. Genevieve's throat tightened. I didn't know they were yours. I fostered your daughters without understanding the connection. Miranda's smile was sad. But you loved them anyway. That's what matters. The drive back to the mansion passed in taut silence, Miranda in Genevieve's passenger seat, while Declan followed in his van. Genevieve's phone rang continuously. Malcolm with legal updates, her assistant with crisis management strategies, the laboratory with additional findings. She ignored all of it, focusing on the road and the woman beside her who represented both answer and complication to questions Genevieve hadn't known how to ask. At the mansion, the overnight nurse had all 6 girls in the therapy room playing with blocks and tablets in the careful proximity of children learning to trust each other. When Miranda saw them through the doorway, her knees buckled. Declan caught her supporting her weight as she stared at 3 girls she hadn't seen in 4 years. Emma, Ava, Zoe. The names came out like prayer. My babies. They looked up simultaneously, some instinct pulling their attention to the woman in the doorway. Emma stood first and walked slowly toward Miranda, her small face serious with the gravity of recognition that defied logic. Her hands moved in careful patterns. Declan's voice was rough with emotion. She's asking if you're the lady from her dreams, the one who sang without sound. Miranda sank to her knees, arms opening. All 3 girls rushed forward, bodies colliding with hers in an embrace that needed no translation. Genevieve watched from the doorway, throat tight with the recognition of something being restored that she hadn't known was broken. Her own 3 girls approached more cautiously, uncertain but drawn by the gravitational pull of connection they couldn't name. Lily reached Miranda first, small hand touching the woman's face with the deliberate curiosity of a child mapping new territory. Rose and Iris flanked her, creating a semicircle of 6 girls surrounding 2 mothers and 1 father who had somehow found each other through disaster. Genevieve knelt beside them and Miranda's hand found hers. We're going to have to figure this out, how to share them, how to be family when nothing about this is conventional. Genevieve squeezed back. We'll figure it out. One day at a time. Miranda's eyes filled. I can't take care of them alone. Not yet. I'm still healing. Still learning how to exist outside captivity. Declan's voice came from behind them. Then you won't be alone. We do this together. All of us. Miranda looked up at her brother. 7 daughters. Between the 3 of us. Declan's laugh was slightly unhinged. Yeah, 7. When you add Wren. Genevieve had almost forgotten. Wren. The 8-year-old who had started this whole pattern. Where is she? Declan pulled out his phone. With my mom. I'll have her bring Wren over. She deserves to meet her sisters. All of them. He stepped away to make the call, leaving Genevieve and Miranda surrounded by 6 small girls who were discovering sibling bonds through touch and vibration and the particular language of children who understood isolation. That night, the mansion transformed. What had been sterile and protocol-driven became chaotic with the particular noise of children testing boundaries. The doorbell rang at 7 and Declan's mother stood on the threshold with a girl who had his dark hair and eyes that carried old pain softened by stubborn hope. Wren took one look at the 6 younger girls and signed with the fluency of someone who had spent her whole life being the only deaf child in hearing spaces. Are these my sisters? All of them? Declan knelt beside his oldest daughter. "You're their big sister, the one who's going to teach them how to be strong." Wren's face transformed wonder, replacing the guardedness she wore like armor. She walked into the mansion and the 6 girls gravitated toward her, immediately recognizing someone who understood their world in ways the adults couldn't. Genevieve watched from the kitchen doorway as 7 girls formed a circle on the floor, hands moving in patterns that created conversation without sound. Miranda stood beside her, and for a moment neither woman spoke. Then Miranda broke the silence. "4 years ago we were in the same room, both of us terrified, both of us alone. And now look at us." Genevieve's throat tightened. "How did you survive 4 years in captivity? How did you stay sane?" Miranda's smile was brittle. "I didn't. Not entirely. I had moments where I believed Crow's lies, believed I'd imagined my daughters, believed I deserved to be erased. It wasn't until Nurse Sarah started showing me proof, bringing me newspaper articles about you and Hartford Industries, that I understood I was being gaslit. Nurse Sarah." Genevieve filed the name away for later gratitude. "She risked her career to save you." Miranda nodded. "She documented everything. The forced medications, the falsified psychiatric evaluations, the financial payments from Dylan's accounts. Without her evidence, we'd have no case." Genevieve's mind was already calculating. "I want to hire her. Whatever she needs. Legal protection, financial security, new job. Done." The girls were teaching each other games, now inventing rules that only made sense to them. Wren showed the younger ones how to feel rhythm through the floorboards, stomping patterns that made them giggle. Emma signed something that made Rose laugh silently. Iris and Zoe stacked blocks in impossible towers that defied gravity until they didn't. Lily watched it all with the serious attention of someone cataloging data for future reference. Declan appeared in the doorway, phone in hand. Malcolm called. "Emergency custody hearing is set for tomorrow 9 a.m. Judge Carolyn Reeves presiding." He paused. "She's known for conservative rulings, traditional family structures. This is going to be an uphill battle." Genevieve's jaw set. "Then we give her a reason to break tradition. We show her what real family looks like." That night, after baths that took 3 times as long, with 7 children, after bedtime routines that dissolved into chaos when someone started a pillow fight that spread like contagion, Genevieve found herself alone in the therapy room. The space looked different now. Less clinical, more lived in. Evidence of play scattered across surfaces that had been carefully maintained in sterile order just days ago. Miranda appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a robe Genevieve had lent her. "Can't sleep." Genevieve shook her head. "Too much to process. Tomorrow we face a judge who will decide if our unconventional arrangement serves their best interests, if biology outweighs presence, if resources matter more than love." Miranda moved to stand beside her. "What do you think will happen?" Genevieve considered. "Honestly, I think we have a chance. Not because our situation is traditional, but because those 7 girls upstairs have bonded in ways that would be cruel to destroy." Miranda's voice was soft. "Even if it means sharing custody with someone you barely know, even if it means your daughters having another mother in their lives." Genevieve turned to face her, especially then, because they deserve more than one person trying to be everything. They deserve a village, a family, whatever that looks like. Miranda's eyes filled. "Thank you for being willing to see it that way. Not every woman would." Genevieve's smile was small but genuine. 4 years ago I would have fought you for sole custody, would have used my resources to destroy any claim you made, but I've learned something in that time." "What's that?" Miranda asked. Genevieve looked toward the stairs where 7 girls slept. "That love doesn't require exclusivity. That family can be built from broken pieces. That the best thing I can give my daughters is the knowledge that they were wanted by more people than just me." Miranda's hand found hers and squeezed. "Tomorrow, then, we fight together." The morning arrived with ruthless efficiency. Genevieve woke to find all 6 of her girls crowded into her bed, having apparently staged a midnight migration that the overnight nurse had been too wise to prevent. They were tangled together like puppies, breathing in synchronization phases, peaceful in ways that broke her heart and rebuilt it simultaneously. She extracted herself carefully, leaving them to sleep while she prepared for the battle ahead. The courthouse was downtown Family Court Division, where the architecture suggested institutional authority and the waiting room smelled like anxiety and stale coffee. Malcolm met her in the lobby with a briefcase and an expression that mixed confidence with concern. "We have a strong case, biology resources Miranda's testimony, but Judge Reeves is unpredictable. This could go either way." Genevieve straightened her suit jacket. "Then we give her a reason to rule in our favor." Malcolm's smile was grim. "That's what I'm counting on." They entered the courtroom together, finding Declan already seated with Miranda beside him. Both looked exhausted but determined, their shared DNA evident in the set of their jaws. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every variation of human failure the family court system could produce. She surveyed the assembled parties with the particular weariness of someone who knew that every decision she made would damage someone. "Let's begin. I've reviewed the emergency petitions. Ms. Hartford seeks full custody of Lily Rose and Iris Hartford with co-guardianship granted to Mr. Declan Cross. Ms. Miranda Cross seeks custody of Emma Ava and Zoe Cross with co-guardianship to Mr. Declan Cross. Is that correct?" Both women confirmed. The judge made notes. "The court notes that biological father Dylan Hartford is currently detained on multiple charges, including conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to kidnapping. His petition for custody has been withdrawn. That simplifies matters somewhat." She looked up. "What the court needs to understand is how this arrangement serves the children's best interests. Ms. Hartford, you've had custody of your biological daughters for 6 months without knowing their relation to you. How does this change your fitness as a parent?" Genevieve stood voice steady despite the stakes. "It doesn't change my commitment to their well-being, Your Honor. What it changes is my understanding of why I failed to connect with them before. I was trying to love them as substitutes for the daughter I lost. Now I can love them as themselves, as the family I thought was gone but was here all along." The judge's expression remained neutral. "And Mr. Cross, you've raised 3 girls under false pretenses. The adoption was based on fraudulent information provided by Dr. Crow. How does that affect your claim to guardianship?" Declan stood hands steady. "The paperwork was false." "Your Honor, my love wasn't. I've been their father for 4 years. Changed diapers, learned sign language, stayed up through nightmares and illness and all the ordinary terror of raising children alone. Finding out they're my nieces doesn't erase that. It explains why I couldn't walk away even when it would have been easier." The judge made more notes. "Ms. Miranda Cross, you were held against your will for 4 years, subjected to medical abuse, separated from your children. The court sympathizes with your trauma. But are you currently capable of providing stable care?" Miranda stood, voice stronger than her frame suggested. "Not alone, Your Honor, not yet, but with my brother's support and Ms. Hartford's resources. I can be part of my daughters' lives while I heal. I'm not asking for sole custody. I'm asking for the chance to know them, to be present as I recover, to show them that their mother didn't abandon them by choice." The courtroom fell silent. The judge reviewed documents, face unreadable. "I'd like to hear from Dr. Sarah Bennett." The judge gestured to the back of the courtroom where Genevieve's speech therapist sat. "Dr. Bennett, you've worked with these children for 6 months. In your professional opinion, what serves their best interests?" Dr. Bennett stood, voice clear. "These 7 children have formed sibling bonds that are crucial to their development. They communicate through shared language, shared experience, and shared trauma. Separating them would cause psychological damage that could take years to repair." 7 children. The judge's eyebrows rose. "I thought we were discussing 6. "Doctor," Bennett nodded. "Wren Cross, age 8, is the biological half-sister to all 6 younger children. She's been present in their lives through Mr. Cross's custody and has taken on a mentorship role with the deaf children. Any custody arrangement that doesn't account for her relationship with her sisters would be incomplete." The judge absorbed this. "Where is Wren currently?" "In the hallway, Your Honor." Declan's voice carried weight. "With my mother. We thought it best not to overwhelm the proceedings." The judge considered. I'd like to meet these children. All 7. Before I make my ruling. Malcolm stood. Your Honor, with respect, that's highly unusual in custody proceedings. So is this entire situation, Counselor. The judge's tone brooked no argument. Bailiff, please bring the children in. The courtroom doors opened and Declan's mother entered with 7 girls in tow. They moved in a cluster, Wren's hand on Emma's shoulder, Lily holding Rose's hand, Iris and Zoe flanking Ava. They looked like a unit, a family born from chaos, but bonded by something stronger than DNA. The judge's expression softened fractionally. Girls, I'm Judge Reeves. I'm trying to decide where you should live and who should take care of you. Can you show me how you talk to each other? Wren stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had spent 8 years translating between worlds. We use sign language, Your Honor. And we feel vibrations. We're teaching the younger ones how to understand music through the floor. She demonstrated, stomping a pattern that the 6 younger girls immediately echoed. The courtroom filled with the sound of small feet creating rhythm, and something in the judge's face shifted. That's remarkable. Who taught you that? Wren's hands moved as she spoke sign and voice together. My dad, Mr. Cross. He learned it for us, so we wouldn't miss out on the things hearing people take for granted. The judge looked at the 3 adults standing before her bench. This court has seen many custody disputes. Most involve parents fighting over children like their property to be divided. This is different. She paused. Ms. Hartford, Ms. Cross, Mr. Cross. The 3 of you are proposing to co-parent 7 children across 2 households with overlapping custody. That's going to be complicated. Are you prepared for that complexity? Genevieve stood. We are, Your Honor, because the alternative is breaking apart something these children have built themselves, and I won't be party to that. Miranda stood beside her. Neither will I. These girls have suffered enough trauma. They don't need adults adding more because we can't figure out how to share. Declan stood last. We're not asking for easy, Your Honor. We're asking for what's right. The judge made final notes, her pen scratching across paper that would determine 7 futures. The court recognizes that this is an unusual situation. 7 children, 3 biological parents complicated by fraud trauma and unconventional family structure. Traditional custody frameworks don't adequately address these circumstances. After reviewing the evidence and considering the children's best interests, I'm prepared to rule. Genevieve's heart hammered against her ribs. The judge continued. Joint custody is granted as follows. Ms. Genevieve Hartford retains primary custody of Lily Rose and Iris Hartford with co-guardianship granted to Mr. Declan Cross. Ms. Miranda Cross is granted primary custody of Emma, Ava, and Zoe Cross with co-guardianship to Mr. Declan Cross pending successful completion of psychological evaluation and trauma counseling. Wren Cross remains in Mr. Cross's custody with visitation rights extended to all parties. The gavel came down with finality that felt like absolution. Genevieve's knees weakened with relief. Beside her, Declan exhaled roughly, and Miranda sobbed once before catching herself. The judge wasn't finished. However, I'm ordering that all 7 children maintain shared living arrangements for the next 6 months, rotating between Ms. Hartford's residence and Mr. Cross's residence on a weekly basis. They've bonded as siblings. Separating them would cause additional trauma. You'll figure out how to make it work, or you'll be back here explaining to me why you put adult convenience over children's welfare. Another strike of the gavel. And one more thing. The judge's eyes hardened. Doctor, Silas Crowe is currently facing criminal charges. Mr. Dylan Hartford is in custody. This court wants both of them to understand that their actions didn't just break laws. They broke families. And the fact that those families have rebuilt themselves despite that damage is a testament to resilience, not forgiveness. Court adjourned. The courtroom erupted in controlled chaos. Malcolm was already on his phone coordinating next steps. The 7 girls rushed to the 3 adults, creating a tangle of arms and relief. Wren's voice cut through the noise. So we all get to stay together. Genevieve knelt, bringing herself to eye level with 7 pairs of eyes that held every hope she had ever felt. We do. All of us. For as long as you want us. They left the courthouse as an unlikely unit. 3 adults bound by 7 children and a shared understanding that family was something you built rather than something you were born into. The media was waiting on the steps, cameras and microphones thrust forward with questions about custody and scandal and the billionaire who had fought for children who weren't all hers until they were. Genevieve ignored them all, head high, walking toward a future that looked nothing like the one she had planned, but felt more right than anything she had built in 4 years of grief. That afternoon, the district attorney released a statement. Dylan Hartford had been formally charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, falsifying death certificates, medical malpractice conspiracy, and accessory to kidnapping. Bail set at $5 million. Trial date set for spring. Dr. Silas Crow faced similar charges, plus additional counts of unlawful detention and medical abuse. Both men were looking at decades in prison. Malcolm called with the update. Dylan tried to contact you from holding. Blocked the number. Thought you should know he's attempting to negotiate a plea deal. Genevieve's voice was cold. Tell the DA I'll testify. So will Miranda. So will every person they damaged. We're not interested in deals. Malcolm's response carried satisfaction. Already conveyed that message. They're proceeding to trial. That evening, the mansion filled with the particular chaos of 7 children testing the boundaries of their new reality. Dinner was loud, messy, punctuated by laughter and the clatter of too many dishes. Miranda helped cook, her movements uncertain but determined, relearning domestic routines through muscle memory. 4 years of captivity had stolen her confidence, but not her ability to love fiercely. Declan set the table for 10, counting Wren's grandmother, who had stayed to help with the transition. The number felt both impossible and inevitable. Genevieve watched from the kitchen doorway as 7 girls invented games that only made sense to them, teaching each other sign language and creating their own dialect that mixed official ASL with improvised gestures. After dinner, after baths that turned into water fights, after bedtime routines that dissolved when Iris discovered she could make the others laugh by making faces, Genevieve found all 7 girls crowded into her bedroom. They had built a fort from blankets and pillows, and inside that cotton-and-down fortress, they were teaching each other secrets. Can we sleep here tonight? Wren's hands moved as she spoke. All of us together. Genevieve looked at Miranda, who stood in the doorway with Declan. Both nodded. Of course, but only if you promise to actually sleep. The girls erupted in silent giggles, hands flying in patterns that meant agreement, even as their eyes promised mischief. Genevieve retreated downstairs with Miranda and Declan, leaving the children to their fort and their bonding. They gathered in the therapy room that had witnessed so much transformation. Tomorrow we start figuring out the logistics. Declan's voice was tired but content. School therapy schedules, how to split time between my apartment and this mansion. We'll make it work. Miranda's certainty surprised even herself. Because the alternative is failing them, and I won't do that again. Genevieve looked at these 2 people who had become her unlikely family. I never expected this. Any of it. 4 years ago I was alone. Building walls. Convinced grief was a life sentence. Miranda's smile was sad. 4 years ago I was in captivity. Convinced I'd never see my daughters again. Convinced I was erased. And I was raising 3 babies alone. Declan's voice carried wonder, trying to be everything they needed, never imagining I'd have help. Genevieve stood, moving to the window where security lights illuminated grounds that had finally become a home rather than a mausoleum. We were all alone. All broken. And somehow these 7 girls put us back together. The night deepened. Upstairs, 7 girls slept in a pile of blankets and trust. Downstairs, 3 adults who had found each other through disaster began the messy work of planning a future that defied every conventional definition of family. And somewhere in a holding cell downtown, Dylan Hartford sat alone with the knowledge that he had fathered 7 extraordinary daughters and walked away from all of them. That knowledge would be his real prison long after the legal consequences ended. Genevieve's phone buzzed one final time. Text from Malcolm. All custody paperwork filed. You're officially a mother of 3 with co-guardian responsibilities for 4 more. Congratulations on your instant family of 7. She showed the message to Miranda and Declan. Both laughed, the sound tinged with hysteria and relief, and the particular joy of people who had survived impossible odds. 7 daughters. Declan's voice carried disbelief. Between the 3 of us, we're responsible for 7 little girls. Miranda's hand found Genevieve's. 7 chances to get it right. To show them that family isn't about perfection. It's about presence. Genevieve squeezed back, looking at these 2 strangers who had become her partners in the most important work she would ever do. Tomorrow would bring challenges, logistics and schedules and the complicated dance of co-parenting across 2 households. But tonight, in this mansion that had finally learned how to be warm, 7 girls slept safely under one roof. And 3 adults who had been strangers 4 days ago stood together in the certainty that whatever came next, they would face it as family. The therapy room that had once held only protocols and sterile equipment now held evidence of play of life of children who felt safe enough to be loud. Genevieve looked at the transformation and understood what Declan had been trying to tell her from the beginning. Victory wasn't a court ruling or a custody agreement or even the DNA results that had started this cascade. Victory was showing up, every day, choosing presence over perfection, building family from whatever broken pieces you had available, and trusting that love was stronger than biology or money or any conventional definition of what belonging should look like. Outside, November wind rattled windows and promised winter. Inside, 7 children and 3 adults who had found each other against impossible odds had begun the messy, complicated, beautiful work of becoming a family that would never fit any traditional mold, but would be exactly what all of them needed. And that Genevieve understood as she climbed the stairs to check on 7 sleeping girls one final time was the only victory that mattered.